The desert sun was setting, casting long shadows over the quiet streets of Summit Ridge, a small town nestled in the heart of nowhere. Jack Marshall, a retired Army Ranger, stood in the doorway of his modest repair shop, watching the horizon with the calm demeanor of a man who had seen more battles than he cared to remember. Life here was simple, and that was exactly why he'd chosen it, for the peace, the predictability, and most importantly, for his daughter, Lily. Lily, a spirited 16-year-old, was the center of Jack's world. Since her mother's death 5 years earlier, it had been just the two of them, navigating life together. Jack worked hard to provide for her, keeping his past in the military compartmentalized from their quiet life. He was fiercely protective of Lily, but he also admired her independence and sharp wit. She was everything good in his life, the reason he kept going. But that evening, when Jack returned home, something was off. The door to their small house was ajar, and the living room looked ransacked. His pulse quickened as he called out, "Lily?" Silence answered him. He rushed to her room, where her bed was unmade, clothes strewn across the floor. Panic clawed at his chest as he noticed her phone lying abandoned on the desk. On the kitchen table lay a piece of paper, hastily scrawled with chilling words. "You've crossed us for the last time. Payback's here. The Black Vultures." Jack's heart sank. The Black Vultures, a notorious biker gang, had been a growing menace in the area, shaking down businesses for protection money and running illegal operations. Jack had refused to pay their extortion demands at his repair shop, unwilling to bow to their threats. He had hoped they'd leave him alone after his firm refusal. He'd been wrong. The thought of Lily in their hands ignited a rage Jack hadn't felt since his days in combat. Every instinct screamed at him to act, but years of military training held him steady. He grabbed his old duffel bag, still packed with remnants of his army days, tools of survival and war. Jack knew the police wouldn't help. They'd been too scared or too bought off to challenge the Black Vultures. As he zipped up the bag, his jaw clenched with determination. "They took the wrong person," he muttered under his breath. For Jack Marshall, this wasn't just a rescue mission. It was personal. He would do whatever it took to bring Lily home and make the gang pay for what they'd done. Jack Marshall moved with calculated precision, his mind racing but his body steady. Years of military training kicked in as he assessed the situation. He knew he couldn't storm blindly into the Black Vultures' territory. If he wanted to bring Lily home safely, he had to outthink them. He had faced worse odds in combat zones, but this was different. This was Lily. Failure wasn't an option. Gathering intel. Jack's first stop was Samantha's bar, a dimly lit dive on the outskirts of town, known for its connection to the Black Vultures. The gang often used the place as a meeting spot, and Jack hoped someone there would know where they had taken Lily. Pushing open the creaky door, he was greeted by suspicious stares and the smell of stale beer. Samantha, the no-nonsense bartender, glanced up from behind the counter, her sharp eyes narrowing when she saw him. "Jack," she said warily, wiping a glass. "What brings you here?" "I need information," Jack said, his voice low and firm. "The Vultures took my daughter." Samantha's face softened, a flicker of sympathy breaking through her hardened exterior. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jack. They don't mess around." "I don't care," Jack said, his jaw tight. "I'm not leaving without her." Samantha leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard they've been using the old Summit Ridge junkyard as a hideout. It's where they do their dirty work, deals, meetings, and worse. If she's anywhere, it's there." Jack nodded, his mind already forming a plan. "Thanks," he said, turning to leave. "Wait," Samantha called after him. "If you're going after them, you'll need more than just guts. They're armed to the teeth." Jack paused, his voice cold. "I've got more than guts." Preparation for war. Back at his repair shop, Jack transformed the space into a makeshift command center. He laid out his gear, an old combat knife, a sidearm, and a collection of tools that could double as weapons. His hands moved with practiced ease, preparing traps and distractions to level the playing field. He also pulled out a map of the junkyard, marking potential entry points and escape routes. Flashbacks of past missions flooded his mind as he planned, but he pushed them aside. This wasn't about the past. This was about Lily. The first move. Under the cover of darkness, Jack approached the junkyard, keeping to the shadows. He had scouted the area earlier, noting the positions of the gang's guards and their motorcycles lined up like trophies. The place was heavily fortified, but Jack wasn't fazed. He'd faced worse odds before. His first objective was to create chaos. Using makeshift smoke bombs, he set off small explosions near the entrance, drawing the guards away from their posts. As they scrambled to investigate, Jack slipped inside, his movements silent and deliberate. Confrontation in the junkyard. The junkyard was a maze of rusted cars, metal scraps, and dim floodlights. Jack moved through it like a ghost, taking out isolated gang members one by one. His strikes were swift and precise, leaving no time for alarms to be raised. Near the center of the junkyard, he found a makeshift office, an old trailer surrounded by armed guards. Jack peered through the window and saw Lily, tied to a chair but unharmed. Relief flooded his chest, but it was quickly replaced by rage. The sight of her in that state fueled his resolve. Jack created another diversion, setting fire to a pile of tires nearby. The thick smoke and roaring flames drew the guards away from the trailer. He slipped inside, his heart pounding. "Dad?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "It's me," Jack said, cutting through her restraints. "We're getting out of here." The escape. Lily clung to Jack as they navigated their way out of the compound. The gang, now alerted to the intruder, was in disarray, shouting orders and firing blindly into the darkness. Jack used his traps and diversions to cover their escape, leading Lily through a narrow gap in the fence. As they reached the edge of the junkyard, the sound of roaring engines filled the air. The gang's leader, Vince Reaper Malone, had arrived with reinforcements. Jack turned to Lily, his voice calm but urgent. "Run to the tree line and don't stop. I'll be right behind you." "But," Lily started, tears streaming down her face. "Go!" Jack barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lily hesitated for only a moment before running as fast as she could. Jack turned to face the approaching gang, his grip tightening on his knife. This was his fight now. A desperate stand. The black vultures swarmed the junkyard, their flashlights cutting through the smoke. Jack used the terrain to his advantage, drawing them into ambushes and taking them out one by one. He moved with the precision of a soldier, his every action calculated and deliberate. But the numbers weren't on his side. The gang pressed closer, their leader barking orders. Jack knew he couldn't hold them off forever, but he didn't need to. He just needed to buy Lily enough time to get to safety. The leader emerges. Reaper finally stepped into the fray, his towering frame silhouetted against the flames. He carried a crowbar, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you can take us down, old man?" he sneered. "You're outnumbered and out of time." Jack smirked, blood dripping from a cut on his cheek. "You shouldn't have taken my daughter." The two men squared off, the tension thick in the air. Reaper charged, swinging the crowbar with brute force, but Jack dodged, his military training giving him the edge. The fight was brutal and raw, each man landing heavy blows. The fiery glow of the burning tires illuminated the junkyard as Jack Marshall faced off against Vince Reaper Malone, the leader of the Black Vultures. Bloodied and bruised, Jack stood tall, his body worn, but his resolve unbroken. He knew this was the moment everything hinged on. Ending the fight here was the only way to ensure Lily's safety. Reaper lunged at Jack with his crowbar, his brute strength making each swing a deadly threat. But Jack was a seasoned fighter, his movements calculated and deliberate. He ducked, sidestepped, and countered with swift, precise strikes. Reaper's arrogance turned to frustration as Jack's combat skills began to overwhelm him. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Reaper spat, swinging wildly. "This is my territory, my rules." Jack didn't respond. He focused on the fight, waiting for the opening he needed. When it came, he struck with a move that sent the crowbar clattering to the ground. Before Reaper could recover, Jack delivered a decisive blow, knocking him to the ground. Breathing heavily, Jack stood over the gang leader, his knife poised. For a moment, he considered ending it then and there. Reaper's gang had taken everything from him, his peace, his livelihood, and nearly his daughter. But Jack knew that killing him would make him no better than the men he despised. Instead, he knelt down and growled, "You're finished. The police will handle you now." Lily's safe return. Jack bound Reaper's hands with zip ties, dragging him toward the center of the junkyard. The remaining gang members, demoralized by their leader's defeat and overwhelmed by Jack's traps, had either fled or been incapacitated. Jack retrieved his radio and called Tom Carter, his retired cop friend, who had tipped off the authorities earlier. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the night as police vehicles swarmed the scene. Officers stormed the junkyard, arresting the remaining gang members and taking Reaper into custody. One officer approached Jack, nodding in respect. "We'll take it from here." Jack gave a curt nod, his focus shifting to the tree line where Lily had taken cover. As he approached, she ran to him, throwing her arms around him in a tearful embrace. "Dad," she cried, "I thought you wouldn't come back." "I'll always come back for you," Jack said, holding her close. A new beginning. As dawn broke over Summit Ridge, Jack and Lily stood outside the smoldering junkyard, watching as the police wrapped up their operation. Though exhausted and battered, they felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was over. "We'll rebuild," Jack said, his voice steady. "Together." Lily nodded, her faith in her father unshaken. They turned away from the wreckage, ready to start anew, their bond stronger than ever. Jack knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he'd already won the most important fight of his life.